I would like to introduce our speaker today. My name is Keith Bradsher. I'm the Hong Kong Bureau Chief for the New York Times, and I'll be your host today on behalf of the Foreign Correspondents Club Board of Governors. About a month ago, I saw a quote from our guest today in which he said that if the booksellers had been kidnapped from Hong Kong, then that would be a violation of one country, two systems. And I thought it's very interesting that we have somebody from the Central Liaison Office speaking to the media. It would be terrific to have him here. And I asked the Foreign Ministry, and they kindly arranged for him to speak here today. Dr. Wang Zhenmin is the Dean of Tsinghua University Law School and a professor of law. He retains those titles while he's here, but he has been transferred down here for a tour since December as the Director General of the Department of Law of the Central Liaison Office, which represents the Chinese government here in Hong Kong. With that, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Wang to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith, for your very kind invitation and introduction. It's my honor to come back to work in Hong Kong. I spent 2 years in Hong Kong in early 1990s. Studied in Hong Kong University law faculty. So 20 years later, I came back. I didn't expect Hong Kong issues, Hong Kong questions are so interesting. Every week you have a surprise. 2 years ago, I was invited by this great club to give a speech on the white paper. Today, my topic is the rule of law, the China story, and its impact on the future of Hong Kong. As you know, the new Chinese government established in 1949 is no longer new anymore, already 67 years. I think the history of New China can be divided into 3 stages. The first 30 years, from 1949 to 1979, China was a political China. Everything was politicalized. Law was nothing. The consequence, the outcome was Cultural Revolution, which was a political disaster. Economy almost collapsed. In 1979, the second 30 years, we experienced an economical China. So you can say the first 30 years is a rule of politics. Second 30 years is a rule of economy. Everything was economy. Now China is so much commercialized. The result is China became number 2 economy in the world. So the achievements are great. Not only Chinese people, but also the world benefit from Chinese growth. However, we didn't modernize the state governance. The connection between economy and the government and the powers are not legalized. So that caused a lot of corruption. This also endangered China's future if we don't change the management philosophy. So after Xi Jinping came to power 2012, I think China the next 30 years, or longer period of time, China entered into the third period. That's a rule of law. So from a rule of politics to rule of economy, and then to rule of law. First 30 years, law was nothing. Second 30 years, law was something. Law became something. So in the next 30 years, we hope law might be everything, especially political, economic, social activities should be legalized. So in 2 years ago, 2014, the fourth plenum of the 18th CPC Central Committee passed a comprehensive rule of law decision. That's for the first time in the Communist Party history. The Communist Party made a very comprehensive, detailed plan how to build rule of law in China. So this plan, I call it a scheme, was further detailed into 190 items of tasks to be implemented. Now, these tasks were already assigned to different state organs to implement. So today, I would like to highlight some of the main legal and judicial reforms which are underway in China. Number one, to strengthen constitutional enforcement. So rule of law means, firstly, rule of the Constitution. You have to guarantee the fully implementation of the Constitution. As you know, in 1949, China made one interim constitution. Since then, from 1949 to 1982, China, 33 years, China made 5 constitutions. 33 years, 5 constitutions. Case, US, over 200 years, you have only 1 constitution. Very inefficient. So how to explain this, political, legal phenomena? If a country always makes new constitutions, so that means there is no constitution at all. So why China always made a new constitution? Because the constitution regulates the behaviors of the government and the citizens. For the government, once the government feels uncomfortable, restricted by the Constitution, they didn't bow to the Constitution. On the other hand, they abolished the Constitution, and they would make a new Constitution which can make them comfortable. So that's why we made so many constitutions. But from 1982, this constitution came into force. Over 34 years, China no longer makes new constitutions. So we uphold one constitution for over 30 years. This is a remarkable progress. That means the Communist Party and the Chinese authorities are willing to be regulated by a law, the Constitution. This is a remarkable progress. I hope in the future, in the long time to come, we will uphold this Constitution, because this Constitution incorporates rule of law principle. For example, Article 5 of this Constitution says all political parties, all state organs must abide by the law and the Constitution. Any law-breaking activities shall be investigated and punished. So that including the Communist Party itself. So I think it is a good constitution. However, this constitution is not fully implemented. So that's why on 2012, December 4th, Xi Jinping made his very first open speech after he became the party secretary general in the Great Hall of the People. What his speech about? It's about the constitutional enforcement. So that shows his strong commitment to the Constitution and to rule of law. So the rule of law scheme passed 2 years ago put constitutional enforcement as the top priority. So there are a lot of discussions now in Beijing, how to establish efficient, effective constitutional enforcement mechanism. For example, some people urge to establish a constitutional court to oversee, the constitutional activities. Some people suggest there should be a constitutional council, like the French model. French established a council constitutional. I hope in the near future there will be a clear answer. In the next few years, I hope such an institution will be established. Number 2, rule of law, you have to have sufficient and good laws. You have, if the law is bad, how can have good rule of law? 40 years ago, after the Cultural Revolution, there was only 2 laws in China, which is the Constitution and the marriage law, the family law. So we had only 2 laws. 2 laws governed the entire country for many years. So China could exist without a law for many years. So today, China has made 247 laws since 1979. But as you know, China is a civil law country. We rely on, statutes, written laws, not cases. Based on my research, a complete rule of law mechanism system requires at least 1,000 statutes. I did research on this, but currently we have only 247. So you can see there is a long way to go. On the list of the National People's Congress and its standing committee, the laws to be made over 120 laws are waiting to be made. However, the members of the Standing Committee of National People's Congress, China's top legislature, most of them are part-time job. So according to the rule of law scheme, in the next National People's Congress, there will be a substantially increased, full-time, congressmen, in order to fulfill, lawmaking tasks. In order to raise the quality of the laws, currently all the draft laws must be publicized on the official website for public comments, opinions, and also any citizen can submit, proposal to make new laws. So the lawmaking process is more open than before. Number 3, how to build a rule of law-based government. to law enforcement. Before, the government leaders thought law was made for lawyers, not for them. Not for them. They had nothing to do with law. If you speak to the Chinese party secretaries, provincial governors, or city mayors, county government heads, they will, tell you how much attention they paid to the documents, official documents. They spent a little time to study law. In my opinion, law is a license issued by the people to the government. So you have to, exercise the executive powers exactly based on your license, which is law. So law has, direct connection with the government. Before, it was two stories, the government and the law, separate. Now we try to combine the two stories into one story. The government must be law-based government, rules-based government. In order to achieve this goal, the State Council, the central government, requires, according to this scheme, all government agencies must enumerate their powers and functions according to law. There must be a list of your powers and functions, based on law. And this list must be publicized. Let the people know how much power the police has, the finance department has. Every department, government department must have a list of their powers. You cannot exceed the legal boundaries. You cannot, on the other hand, once a function and a power is put into your list, you must exercise your powers. Also, all government policies must accept legality review before they are fully adopted. In the policy-making process, there must be involvement from lawyers, legality review, before the policy was formally adopted. Also, government actions must accept the judicial review. So last May, China, we revised the administrative litigation law, enlarged the scope of administrative litigation. So more and more governmental executive activities now subject to judicial review. I know in Hong Kong we have a lot of discussion on judicial review, but in mainland China we enlarge, the scope. So government behaviors must subject to, judicial supervision. Number 4, to guarantee judicial fairness, raise judicial credibility. In the past, once a case was filed into the court, the presiding judge would accept phone calls from the city mayors or party secretaries to interfere the case. According to the scheme, now any interferences from outside of the court must be recorded and must be publicized on newspaper. So the court is requested to make a record who interview, your decision making. If you pay attention on Chinese media, recently there were several cases are publicized. For example, Beijing City Bureau Chief called Beijing City Court to interfere a case, and he was publicized and also punished. So to fully guarantee judicial fairness, you must guarantee the judges, the court can exercise their powers independently. Also, we are establishing unified judicial system. Before, Chinese courts are localized, controlled by local governments. So the judges are appointed by local Congress, they're paid by the local governments, so they have to take care of the local interest. So we call local judicial protectionism. Now, all the courts in a province, like Guangdong province, all courts in Guangdong will be financed by Guangdong provincial government, no longer by Shenzhen city or local governments. And the judges will be nominated centrally, not by local mayor anymore, to centralize the judicial system, to divorce the judiciary from local governments and local people's Congress. Also, the Supreme Court, according to the scheme, established the circuit courts to handle cross-region cases. The number 1 circuit court already established in Shenzhen. Access to justice. Before, it is very difficult to file a lawsuit in mainland China court. Now, according to the scheme, currently, if you go to a Chinese court to file a case, the court cannot refuse, cannot reject your application. They must accept. So to fully guarantee people's access to justice. So that increased a lot of workload to the courts. Also, the treatment for judges. The salaries for judges will be increased 50%. Compared with the civil servants, this is a huge increasement. A lot of people don't feel good because their civil servants, they don't pay the same. Before, the judges are just treated like civil servants, paid the same salary. Now, China increased 50% salaries for all judges in China. All judgments will be put online. As a law professor, it's very difficult to find a judgment. According to the Constitution, the judgment should be open, should be available to the public. But in reality, it's not easy to find a judgment. Today, if you, go on the open the Supreme Court website, you can see all the judgments on the website. This also, increased a lot of pressure on judges. Before, because the judgments are not available to the public, they could make grammar mistakes. Sometimes they even cite, the laws which was abolished long time ago. So today, because it's open to the public, so the quality of the judgment, the fairness of judgment are substantially increased. To increase the judicial protection of human rights, to guarantee the litigation participants, the parties, right to know, right to make comments, right to defense and debate, right to make requests, and right to appeal. Another change on judicial system is to standardize the relationship between the court and the parties, the society. So before, the Chinese judges go to parties very easily. Today, it is strictly prohibited. Chinese people always tend to find guanxi, to settle everything, including their legal disputes. But today, this is a very sensitive question. If you call a judge, even your classmates, your lawyer, if you call your classmate who is a judge to have meals, this will be punished. So this is the judicial reform. Number 5, to strengthen the entire population's rule of law awareness. All party and the government leaders, cadres are required to study law. before, Chinese, officials, a lot of them study MBA, EMBA to study business. But today, it is prohibited to study EMBA, MBA anymore. Because if they study MBA, EMBA, all they meant fear of money. So that's why, so much corruption. According to the plan, so law is required. You must study law. Also from primary school, law courses will be taught, starting from primary school, secondary school. Number 6, to strengthen the legal profession. 40 years ago, there was no lawyer in China at all. 1979, only 100 also people who claimed they are lawyers at that time. But today we have 300,000, lawyers, excluding judges, prosecutors, private practice lawyers. You can see, there is a very substantial increasement of lawyers. Recently, the central authorities, including the Supreme Court, issued, the measures how to protect the rights of the lawyers, to guarantee the lawyers fully exercise their rights in court. To strengthen foreign-related legal service, to protect foreigners' interests in China. Number 6, the CPC leadership and the rule of law. How to deal with the CPC leadership and the rule of law. According to the scheme, all leading cadres officials must cherish law with a heart of reverence. Keep firmly in mind that legal red line cannot be exceeded. Legal baseline may not be touched. They must take the lead in abiding by the Constitution and the law. So required all the party officials must abide by the Constitution and law. Any violation will be investigated. According to the scheme, the CPC is making efforts to raise the rule of law thinking of the party members and their ability to conduct affairs according to law. So that's my summary about so what China is going to do, or some already happens in mainland China on how to build rule of law. My next question is, so what impact if China builds rule of law? So what impact on the future of Hong Kong? I must say, even when rule of law was not established a long time ago, China already applied a legal approach in handling Hong Kong affairs. This can be evidenced in 1982. One country, two systems was formulated in early 1980s. The purpose is to achieve unification with Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau. At that time, China was still run under the, I think basically, rule of man, not yet rule of law. But in 1982, when China made the new constitution, which is the current constitution, Article 31 already constitutionalized one country, two systems in order to give constitutional protection of one country, two systems. Article 31 provides the state may establish special administrative regions when necessary. The systems to be instituted in special administrative regions shall be prescribed by law, enacted by National People's Congress in light of specific conditions. The Chinese government at that time, still recently in a conference, I said, we not rule of law, we were rule of papers or rule of documents, Zhenmin Mao even said, the commentary of the People's Daily can be enforced nationwide. So what's the use to make a law anymore? But people just read People Daily to run the country. So you can see the media in China even played even important role in the West. We use media as a management mechanism for many years. But when the one country, two systems policy was formulated, people in Hong Kong raised the question, how to guarantee this policy can be fully implemented? So the answer is we will constitutionalize and also legalize this policy in order to guarantee this policy will not be changed whenever the leadership changes or whenever the focus or attention of the leaders changes. So that's the first effort to legalize one country, two systems. That's the 1982 Constitution. Secondly, in 1984, when China and the UK reached agreement on Hong Kong's future, signed the Sino-British Joint Declaration. China specifies its policies towards Hong Kong. So one country, two systems were further expanded. According to the Joint Declaration, those basic policies will be stipulated in a basic law of Hong Kong Special Administration in the PRC by the National People's Congress and will remain unchanged for 50 years. So that's international treaty, guarantee. So from 1985 to 1990, 4 years and 8 months, China made the basic law. So the basic law is a fully legalized the one country, two system, provide a strong legal protection for Hong Kong SAR, high degree autonomy, and the Hong Kong people run Hong Kong. Today, when the rule of law scheme, the 190 items of tasks completed in mainland China. So what impact on Hong Kong's future? I think this will change the landscape in the mainland. For example, China will honor its commitments to fully implement one country, two systems under the basic law. So according to the scheme, actually the scheme has a paragraph about Hong Kong, how to run Hong Kong according to the rule of law principle. So the first measure is to make basic law enforcement mechanism more workable. People complained a lot in recent years. The basic law is not fully implemented, both in Hong Kong and the mainland. Mainland people also complained. So we are doing research on this question, how to, for example, how to increase participation of the Hong Kong legal community when the National People's Congress Standing Committee interprets the basic law, to enlarge, the opportunity for Hong Kong legal profession, to enter into Chinese legal market. To further protect human rights and the lawful interests of the Hong Kong people in the mainland, to strengthen legal aid, legal and judicial assistance between Hong Kong and mainland China. So there are several very detailed plans how to fully implement the basic law. China is a normal country, like many other countries. We have many good points. We also have many shortcomings. So far, human being never established rule of law in a country with almost 4 billion people. If you look at the rule of law in other countries, like the US, UK, when they built the rule of law, the population was very small. Today, when we draft a law, I participate in many law drafting process, we had to consider the needs of 1.4 billion people. In the US, you need only consider 300 million people. Very diverse, very diverse. You had to consider the very complicated social conditions. Not so many people like rule of law. Not many countries in the world achieve rule of law. If you did research on the, I think 205 countries of UN, I think, many countries, didn't succeed in building rule of law. So it's very challenging. It's more difficult than develop economy, than political campaigns. The Chinese President Xi Jinping said, rule of law is not human nature. Human nature is the rule of man. People always tend to apply rule of law to others, not to themselves. They want to apply rule of man to themselves. But the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government are determined, to build a rule of law country. In my opinion, this is the third nation-building effort in China. The first nation-building effort was by Chairman Mao to build a political China, build the political infrastructure in 1950s, 60s. The second nation building was by Deng Xiaoping to build an economic China. So the third nation building is to build a legal China, a rule of law China. And Xi Jinping make rule of law as one of his very important, policies. This is something we must achieve. To be or not to be, this is not a question. Very different results. I think we cannot afford another failure. We must succeed, and we can succeed. Thank you very much.
So why don't I begin the questions? And I guess one that has just been in the news is whether or not, and something that you'd commented on earlier, is whether or not the so-called, those advocating independence or some right of self-determination in Hong Kong would be subject to criminal penalties. This had come up in 2003 in the context of Article 23, when some people had asked, do those laws, the older laws, still stay in force, given there's so many common law cases elsewhere that are contradictory and hard to assess? What is your view on whether calls for self-determination or independence violate or not the current criminal laws of Hong Kong? Mr. Fong, did you want to do an official translation? Let's get the microphone here, please, for Mr. Fong for that question, please.
王部长您好，首先我想问第一个问题，就是关于在香港如果有人宣扬独立或者说是自决的话，这是否是应该受到刑事条例的惩处？ 相类似的这个问题呢，在过去也曾经讨论过。就香港所实行的这个普通法体系的问题呢，人们有这种相关的争论。所以我的问题就是，您对这样的一个情况如何看？您觉得，如果有人在香港宣扬独立或者是自决的话，是否是应该受到这个刑事的这个惩处？
Okay, thank you for your question. Firstly, I shall say, freedom of speech is fully protected by the basic law and also Chinese Constitution. Today, the freedom of speech is enlarged a lot. It is a fact. However, in any countries, any places, there should be some reasonable limitations. I would suggest the audience to read the 1999 judgment by the Court of Final Appeal on the case national flag case. On that case, on that judgment, the Court of Final Appeal very clearly set up the limitation on freedom of expression. So you cannot exceed the limitation. Otherwise, that's crime. That's crime. Also, recently I read a case made by the U.S. Federal Circuit Court. 2013, there was a case. A person translated holy war materials by ISS into English and put it online for people to read. And this person was punished by the U.S. Circuit Court, 17 years, 6 months in prison. So just translation of holy war materials into English language and put it online. And the Supreme Court of U.S. rejected the appeal. So the court is very clear, says, if we cannot afford the consequence of your language, if your language is realized, but the consequence we cannot afford, so the court will stop the language, the speech without any hesitation, because we cannot afford the consequence. I think obviously, such kind of speech, language, they break the basic law. I don't know whether you pay attention. One item of their charter is to abolish the basic law, to make Hong Kong Constitution. So what does that mean? To abolish Hong Kong basic law, that means to abolish all the governmental institutions, including the executive, the legislative, the judicial organs, and everything, from the basic law. So that, what does that mean? What does that mean? So we cannot afford, people said that they cannot achieve. But even in the efforts, I don't believe they can achieve Hong Kong independence. I also, I agree they cannot achieve. But in the process to making efforts to achieve, Hong Kong independence, that will cause a lot of conflict, a lot of social instability. Even, according to Hong Kong local law, the crimes ordinance and the society's ordinance, it is still, the law enforced in Hong Kong. And this law was made by the British government long time ago. And it has been applied in 1946 and the 1950s, 1960s. It's still the law in Hong Kong. I call the audience and the journalists to carefully read the Hong Kong laws. They still enforce today. We cannot say, this law is too old. This law is too old. So it's out of date. But you don't have new laws. So in 2003, Hong Kong tried to make new laws, the national security law. Actually, that will give more, space but Hong Kong did not succeed. So it is still the law. So I think what is the rule of law? Rule of law means the rule of the existing laws, including the existing ordinance, existing judgments. So we have to follow these existing laws and the judgments. So that's common law tradition. And every people should be equal before the law. So doesn't matter what's the purpose. We cannot say, he is advocate, independence, for political purpose. So we cannot punish. Just like, we for democracy, can you robbery of people? I think that's very clear.
Okay. And one more question, then we'll go to our audience. But the original comment that caught everybody's attention was you're saying it's not legal for mainland agencies to kidnap anybody from Hong Kong. That is a violation of one country, two systems. Would you please elaborate? Because I think that's been a subject of tremendous concern to the people of Hong Kong. Why do you think that is not legal?
我还有一个问题，就是您之前呢曾经也做过如下的表态，这也引起了很多人的关注。就是您曾经说过，内地机构如果在香港绑架港人回内地的话呢，这是非法的，这也是违背了一国两制。那么现在想，请问您是否可以更多的来谈一谈就这个议题？因为这个议题呢，我相信在香港也引发了非常多的关注。
To be honest, I don't know the facts, all facts like you. That's very unfortunate, incident. No one wants to see such kind of case happen here in Hong Kong. And no one wants to see it happens again in future. I'm happy that Mr. Li Bo returned to Hong Kong and returned to his normal life as usual. Just one point I would like to emphasize. According to the basic law, it should be very clear, only Hong Kong SAR government agencies can enforce law within the legal jurisdiction of Hong Kong. Only Hong Kong law enforcement agencies can enforce law in Hong Kong. This is very clear. This is protected by the basic law and one country, two systems. China will continue to uphold one country, two systems policy, uphold the basic law, rule of law principle in handling cross-border issues, honor our commitments to the Hong Kong society. This is not changed. This is very clear. On the other hand, I want to say, any people outside mainland China should also respect Chinese constitution and the Chinese laws, should encourage China to build rule of law. The government also needs encouragement. If every day, we always criticize the government like people, the government like people. So on the one hand, we should criticize. On the other hand, we should also encourage the government to do right things, good things. So I hope, any people outside mainland China, China's jurisdiction should also respect Chinese constitution and Chinese law. Shouldn't do anything harmful to Chinese national security and the interests of the entire Chinese people, including our Hong Kong residents. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We're running over time. Normally we end at 2, but Dr. Wang has kindly agreed to stay on a little longer. Please identify yourselves with your name and news organization. Frank first.
Hi, Professor Wang. Thank you so much for your two-part presentation. The first part was about rule of law in China, and I'd like to ask you, isn't it ironic that you say the Communist Party is implementing rule of law in China, and when the party puts itself above the law, above the constitution, and in the current anti-corruption campaign, for instance, it's been carried out by the party and not by the government. And you say that China is a normal country, and yet what normal country would do that? Would have the party run things rather than the government run things. And in China, the military, the People's Liberation Army, belongs to the party, doesn't belong to the government. What normal country has that? Is China really a normal country, as you claim it to be? Is it because it has 1.4 billion people? If the US had more people, you think the US would put the Republican Party in charge of the military instead of the government? And then the second part of your talk, of course, has to do with one country, two systems. And we've been talking about the Libor case. Can you illustrate how the basic law has been, as you put it, fully implemented by China by citing the basic law, by citing the Libor case?
Could you identify your media affiliation?
Sure. My name is Frank Ching. I freelance.
OK，我是一位这个自由记者。那么我的问题呢，就是关于您刚才的这个演讲呢，是两个部分。第一个部分呢，谈到了在中国的这个法治建设。那么我认为呢，现在在中国呢是党领导一切的。那么党呢是共产党是置于宪法和法律之上的。比如说，在现在所进行的这个反腐的这个行动呢，就是由党来领导，而不是由政府来主导的。所以王部长，您刚才说中国是一个正常国家，但我并不觉得正常国家应该是这样。那么，包括中国的军队现在也是听党指挥，而不是说听中国政府指挥。而我们看到，在美国就不是这样。所以这是关于您的前半部分的这个演讲，后半部分您谈到了就是在这个香港的情况。那么我的问题就是，那么考虑到李波案件的这个发生，那么您认为，如果就这个案件来看，如何显示出这个基本法是被全面执行了呢
？Thank you, Frank. Old friends. I think we discussed the first question many times, long time ago. You know, there is a saying, every person is an exception. Not even the twins, you can find the distinction. Every country is an exception. You cannot copy this country to another. No, you know, some system maybe, you know, work very well in one country, but other countries may totally doesn't work. So we see the American-style democracies works very well in the U.S. Even today, recently Professor Larry Diamond in Hong Kong said it's a failure. And the promotion of American-style democracy in other countries also a failure, especially in the Middle East, caused so many refugees. I think China, the political constitutional system is just the outcome of the historical development. So we cannot choose the history. It's a reality. So the CPC leadership, before, you know, they ran the country without a law. Without a law, they will still run the country. Today, they want to employ legal mechanism, legal means to run the country. So what do we choose? Do you choose management without a law? Like in many years, there was no law. In many areas, no laws. Or today, the CPC is determined to build the rule of law in China. So the
My question is China a normal country? What other country is like that? You say China is a normal country.
As I said, you know, I said the normal country means every country has its good things, also has its own special situations. So that's normal. Like the US. The US has good things. I studied in the US. I thought that your constitution is really a miracle. It's very good. But US also has, you know, very bad things. This is normal. So you don't expect China is, everything is perfect. We never expect that. But you cannot say, China, everything is bad. Everything is bad. So as long as I like the saying by Deng Xiaoping. It doesn't matter whether a cat is black and white as long as it catches mice. It doesn't matter what kind of political system a country has as long as it settles the questions of the particular country. It can serve the people. This is a good system as long as it can solve the problems of the country. So the Communist Party, manage the country, so many people get rid of poverty. Several hundred million people, now have food, have clothes. 40 years ago, everything was not that. So I think the Communist Party tried to combine rule of the party, the leadership of the party, rule of law, and also rule of the people together. Party leadership, democracy, and rule of law combined together. This is an experiment. No, as I said, no country like that. But China, I think we should try. We should try to build, how to combine party leadership, rule of law, and rule of the people together. I think this is the best, path for China to pursue.
Okay.
The second question, I don't know we have time. Actually,
Yes, well,
Yeah.
please do answer the second question, yes.
Yeah.
We've gone over the time that he said he had to leave, but please do answer the second question because your remarks at the start filled up more of the time than we expected.
On the question how to fully implement the basic law, I think there are two ends. From the Hong Kong side, the end of Hong Kong, this is from Hong Kong, I think we, like the mainland, the central authorities, we cannot choose some articles of the basic law to implement and ignore other articles. For example, the discussion about the relationship between one country and two systems. It is seemingly, some people in Hong Kong emphasize the two systems. The articles about two systems are fully implemented. For the one country, we ignore. We just pretend we don't know. We don't know one country. No articles in the basic law about one country. I think that's not the truth.
So thank you very much, Dr. Wang. We appreciate your coming to speak here. Let me